Explain how sexual reproduction can eventually lead to evolution in offspring. What I'm going to talk about in this question is about how to answer it, and it's kind of tricky. When they talk about sexual reproduction, they want you to talk about variation or increasing numbers of different traits, and then afterwards with evolution, they want you to talk about natural selection or decreasing that number of the variation. So let's talk about the first thing, which is variation. Well, sexual reproduction leads to variation, and this is through actually 4 different mechanisms. The first one is through meiosis. And I suppose it's not actually 4, it's actually 3, and meiosis covers a couple of those different points. So the second point we're going to talk about is meiosis in sexual reproduction causes variation. And within meiosis itself, there are 2 things which cause further variation. First one is independent assortment. Second one is crossing over. And crossing over is just the event which occurs during meiosis 1, metaphase 1 in fact, where the homologous chromatids, they cross over each other and exchange genetic material. The final thing is fertilisation, which also leads to variation. So remember these 4 different points. The second thing we're going to do is we're going to talk about natural selection. This is where it gets a bit trickier, and we want to talk about how certain genes are heritable in an organism. Remember, a gene is a trait which is heritable and controls a specific characteristic. Now, if this trait or gene is advantageous, then that organism will have an increased chance to survive and pass on its genes to its own organisms, compared to other organisms who die off. And that's what we're going to write in the next point. Organisms without the trait will be more likely to die off and not likely to pass on their genes to their offspring. And this is the process known as natural selection. Those ones which have good traits are more likely to be selected and more likely to be selected for survival and to give off offspring. Now, as this process repeats over time, only individuals with the advantageous trait will be in the population, and this is known as evolution. The process of evolution is a long one, and only when you have a certain species displaying the same trait, all of those particular organisms, then that is known as evolution.